Morning, everyone. So we're doing a series called Jesus Through the Eyes of John, and we're in chapter 5 and verse 1, which tells us that sometime later Jesus went up to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish festivals. So suppose for a moment that you're in the software business, and every year your company sends you to the annual software conference and exhibition in Las Vegas. One of the things that you'll enjoy about that, if you go, is the opportunity to network with your business peers. So as you walk around the exhibition floor, you'll schmooze, you'll make contacts, you'll exchange business cards, business information, do whatever you can to get information out of your industry peers to help you further your business and or career. That's what you do at conferences, right? You network. When John tells us that Jesus is in Jerusalem for a festival, he's telling us that Jesus has gone to the world's most religious of cities, and during this festival there'll be lots of religious people there who are in the same business that he's in, the God industry. Bible teachers will be there, experts will be there, specialists from every colour on the religious spectrum. And this will be a great opportunity for these like-minded people to network and to further their own businesses, careers, whatever it is they're into. Over morning coffee and croissants, people will do deals and exchange information. Great if you like that kind of thing. Jesus, however, doesn't like that kind of thing. Consistently in the story, he doesn't enjoy hanging out with the religiously well-placed. And so rather than walking the floor of the conference centre like everyone else, we're told that there was a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, is surrounded by 5 colonnades. Then John tells us that here a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, and the paralysed. So, in a city that symbolized religious orthodoxy, during a festival attended by people who specialized in religious orthodoxy, there is an underworld of people who are extremely unorthodox. People who don't fit in. People who wouldn't be welcome at the temple, in the synagogue, and certainly not at the conference happening upstairs. The pool that John is describing in this sentence isn't a swimming pool, but a healing pool, an ancient Lourdes, if you will, to which the sick brought their diseases and infirmities in the hope of being healed. And the wrinkle with this information is that in the first century, the Jewish faith didn't do healing pools. Healing pools had more to do with pagan Greek superstition than they did with first century Jewish orthodoxy. Consequently, no self-respecting Bible teacher would ever set foot near one of these places. Furthermore, the categories of disability that John mentions in this sentence were all thought to be symptoms of sin. If you lived in the first century and you saw a person who was blind or lame or paralyzed, the immediate assumption that you would have made is that they had it coming, that their sickness was a direct result of their own sin. And for that reason, none of those people would have been allowed anywhere near the conference happening upstairs. They wouldn't have been welcomed. So, this healing pool, from the perspective of first century Jewish religious life, is a cesspool. So notice what's happening, therefore. Jesus is in town for a religious conference. He's supposed to be hanging out with his religious peers, doing religious things. He checks into the hotel, looks at the conference schedule, yawns uncontrollably, walks out of the hotel, steps into a taxi, and says, "Take me to the cesspool. This place is too clean for me. too perfect. I can't take me to the dirtiest, the seediest, the darkest part of the city. I'd like to be there rather than here. Then John says that among the disabled was one who had been invalided for 38 years, which, given the life expectancy and antiquity, is pretty much his entire life. So in this sentence, we're introduced to a man who has known nothing but the inconvenience of invalidity and, in his culture, the shame of sin that went with it. And then we're told that when Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in that condition, pause on the word learned. When Jesus sees this guy, he takes time to ask questions. And I love this about Jesus. I mean, here you are, Jesus. You're meant to be in the world's most religious city with the world's most religious people upstairs at that religious conference doing religious things. And yet here you are in the bowels of the city, in the darkest, dirtiest bit of it, taking time to get to know the sad story of a guy who's known nothing but bad luck his entire life. I like this about you. It makes you human to me. And so Jesus says to him, do you want to get well? At which point I imagine the guy goes, I'm at the healing pool. The clue's in the name. Why do you think I'm here? But really it's a fair question of Jesus to ask. You see, when you've been one way for 38 years, it doesn't matter how dissatisfactory that way is. The thought of changing is difficult, right? When life has put you in a place where you've dealt with disappointment upon disappointment upon disappointment, no matter how much you hate the disappointment, it's comfortable to you. It's familiar to you. And so the idea of moving somewhere else and doing something else, yeah, that's hard. When you are in a dissatisfactory situation, dealing with horrible problems day in, day out, in a perverted way, you kind of get used to the dissatisfaction and the inconvenience, and you just kind of make peace with it. And so when someone says to you, don't you think you'd be better off doing this? Don't you think you'd be better off trying that or moving there? Why are so many of you pointing at the person sitting next to you? That's like, I've touched a raw nerve, clearly, right? You get used to your misery, regardless of how miserable it is. So it's a fair question. Dude, I can help you, but you've been miserable for 38 years. Are you okay with your misery, or do you want me to help? Have you made peace with your problems, or do you want me to give you a hand? The guy says, yeah, of course I'd like to get better. And then we get a weird piece of information. He says, I've no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I try to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me. So apparently the superstition at this particular healing pool was that every now and again the water would tremble. People apparently believed that was caused by an angel fluttering its wings or whatever. And the game was, first guy into the pool wins the prize of healing. Everyone who's second, third, and so on, they get nothing. And if you are, disabled, I think that game's slightly cruel, don't you? Like, this will be fun, let's watch this. In fact, I actually think that a lot of what passes for healing in the religious world is cruel. And I think that cruelty is evident right across the religious spectrum. You go to these big healing things you see on television, and they show you some guy on stage with a spurious illness that gets healed, but the camera doesn't go to the people in who are wheeled in on beds at the back, giving up their valuable dollars for something that they don't get. Take a look at this. These are people who've gone to Lourdes. You know, big deal in the religious world. Every year millions of people go on this pilgrimage. And to me it's slightly cruel because, and I give credit to the Catholic Church for this, they keep accurate records of the number of miracles that happen in Lourdes. And so we know that the odds of getting a miracle at Lourdes are slightly worse than the odds of winning Lotto Max next Friday night. Now, so you go there with hope, but it's a fool's hope. It's slightly cruel. It's slightly perverse. And I certainly get that perversity in this biblical sentence. For 38 years I've been coming to the place of healing, and the deal in getting the healing is that I've got to jump in the pool first, but my legs don't work. You kidding me? And then in the next sentence, it's disappointingly economic with details. Love it. Jesus says to him, "Get up, pick up your mat and walk." Once the man was cured, he picked up his mat and walked. Brilliant story. At least it would be if we stopped it there. Notice what it says next, however. The day on which this took place was the Sabbath. Can you see the storm clouds gathering? So up until now it's a story about a man who gets healed, but now it's a story about a man who gets healed on the Sabbath. This is game-changing information. The word Sabbath, as I'm sure you know, comes from the Hebrew word Shabbat, which means to rest. Beautiful word. I vote yes. I was thinking about that word 4 hours ago when I woke up. You know, you're working hard all day, you come home for what? Rest. Slogging your pan in all year, you're looking forward to your summer vacation so you can have a rest. This afternoon when you go home, if your wife lets you, you're going to have a... Yeah, probably not. Fantastic word, beautiful word, humane word, one of our favourite words. And as I'm sure you know, this concept of rest, this beauty, comes from the fourth of the 10 Commandments. Let's refamiliarize ourselves with it. The commandment says, "Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days shall you labour and do your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not work, neither you, your son, your daughter, your manservant, your maidservant, etc., etc., etc." And during Jesus' lifetime in the first century, these words were regarded as being among, if not the most important words in the entire Bible. So important that rabbis of every stripe, including the ones who were at this conference with Jesus, spent much of their careers expanding upon and explaining to people what this fourth commandment meant in real life. Consequently, the Jewish rule book, the Mishnah, has an entire section of details that explain what is and isn't work, and therefore what is and isn't prohibited on the Sabbath day. For example, there's actual rules written down in this book that say you can't tie a knot because that's work and therefore prohibited on the Sabbath. You can't boil an egg because that's work, therefore prohibited on the Sabbath. You can't walk any more than 1,999 paces on the Sabbath day because that's work and therefore absolutely prohibited. You get the idea, to get a picture of what Jesus is dealing with. He lived in a world that defined spirituality as being the successful keeping of Sabbath rules. The rabbis who are at this conference with Jesus all believed that nothing mattered more than following the Sabbath rules. And so here they see a man carrying a mat. And they flick open their rule book and they go, "Ooh." Man's carrying a mat. It says here you're not allowed to carry mats. I've literally never carried a mat in my life. I swear this is the first time, right? So they go up to this guy, right, and they say, hey, you're carrying a mat, dude, it's against the rules. And then the man who's carrying the mat says, it wasn't my fault. The man who made me well told me to pick up my mat and walk. So what's happening here? There's a group of religious experts at the conference. They're having their morning coffee and croissants. They're congratulating one another on how brilliant and accurate their rules are. They maybe just invented a few extra rules to clarify what people can and can't do on the Sabbath. And they see this guy carrying a mat, and they go up to him and say, why are you carrying a mat? And the guy says, it wasn't me, some other guy told me to carry the mat. The guy who made me get up and walk. Did you get that information? But they didn't. So now they're incensed. Because what's more dangerous than someone who breaks their rules is someone who tells people to break their rules. And so they say to him, who is this that told you to pick up your mat and walk? Now at this point the air is thick with irony for me. The religious experts are given two pieces of information. Piece of information number one, 30 minutes ago this guy was disabled. He couldn't walk. And now he's walking. Piece of information number two, he's carrying a mat. Now for me, I feel the main headline here is he couldn't walk and now he can. I think that should be the top of the page. I feel the headline shouldn't be, he's carrying a mat. But notice what they notice. This is bad religion in a sentence. It notices the wrong things. Could be bad life in a sentence. Noticing the wrong things. Could be a bad relationship in a sentence. Noticing the wrong things. Focusing on the wrong things. Picking up on the wrong things. All the while missing the main headlines, which are actually fantastic. So, anyway, they ask who is this person who told you to pick up your mat? Then the next sentence we read that the man actually had no idea who he was, for Jesus had slipped away into the crowd. That's a weird detail, isn't it? Like, I've never told anyone to pick up their mat, and I've never healed anyone either. But if I healed someone, I'd be hanging around for the selfie. Would you not? I'd want a little bit of affirmation at least. You see this curious detail in the Gospels, almost in all of them. Jesus is almost secretive about his work. He likes doing it, but he doesn't like people to know that he's doing it. Doesn't like attention at the wrong time. Bizarre. Probably because he doesn't want people getting the wrong idea. Anyway, however, Jesus, apparently he leaves the cesspool, goes back upstairs to the conference in the temple where it's happening, and he found the guy in the temple. Look at that sentence. The person who was formerly prohibited from entering the temple because of his disability, the person who was formerly consigned to the cesspool in the bowels of the city, is now welcomed with open arms at the heart of the religious establishment. For the first time in 38 years, maybe for the first time in his life, he feels he's connected to God. And you just know he's in the temple with a smile on his face. You just know he's there giving those happy, thankful prayer things that we sometimes pray. This is a good day in his life. Jesus finds him and kills the buzz. He says, hey, it's great to see you well again. And then he says, and why did he have to say this? stop sinning or something worse may happen to you. Yeah, it's a very Tony Soprano thing. It is, right? I'm right to pick up on the sinister nature of that, haven't I? Now, we're uncomfortable with this. Living as we do in the 21st century, we reject the connection made between sin and sickness. If I were to say to you that I got some disease, and you were to say to me it's because you sinned, I wouldn't appreciate that. I would think you'd a slightly medieval view of medicine. And in fact, we know from other parts of the Gospels that Jesus was similarly uncomfortable with making this connection. But nonetheless, this is the first century, and this is what people believed. There was some connection between sin and sickness. So what Jesus says to this guy is, it's great you're in the temple, but you know what? There's worse fates in this world than not being able to walk. There's worse fates in this world than the things you're currently aware of. So fly straight. Live right. What did he mean? Was he referring to judgment? To heaven and hell? Who knows? But it's a sobering statement. Anyway, then the man went away, and I hate this next sentence. He told the Jewish leaders that it was Jesus. Like the wee Torah, he grasped Jesus up. Jesus has just given him the best day of his life. And an hour later, he informs on Jesus. What do you think of this man now? Scum. Absolute scum. Ugly, disgusting human being. And you know what? I'm glad that this detail is in here. I'm glad that Jesus helps the scum and the ugly and the untrustworthy man in this story. Because if Jesus only helped the nice and the decent and the loyal, I'm not sure where that would leave me. And I'm pretty sure where it would leave you. Right? There's this horrible man and Jesus helped him. This is good news for all horrible men. This is a guy who can't be trusted. Jesus helps him. It's good news for all of us who can't be trusted. So, where was I? Anyway, they find out Jesus is doing these things on the Sabbath, and the Jewish leaders begin to persecute him. Totally, again, missing the headline that he helped the man significantly. In his defense, Jesus, ever the consummate diplomat, made things worse. His viewpoint seems to have been, if you think it was bad what I just did, wait till you hear what I'm about to say. If you got upset by that, get out your notepads. Turn on your cameras. You're going to want to put this on YouTube, because this is going to really upset you. He says, my Father is always at work to this very day, and I too am also always working. So what he's saying in this sentence to the rabbis is, I have a question for you. And it should be an easy question for you to answer. You are, after all, religious experts. And my question is, does God keep the Sabbath? Does God in heaven obey the words of the fourth commandment? And if your answer to that question is yes, then my follow-up question is, who's running the universe while he's having a Sunday afternoon nap? And so consequently, the consensus of opinion among first century rabbis was that God never stopped, God never rested, God was perpetually active, eternally active. So there was an agreement among rabbis that God was always at work, even on Sabbath days. But then, so there's no problem so far, but then look at what Jesus does. He takes this same logic about God always working, even on the Sabbath, and he applies that logic to himself. Now, he didn't need to do that. There was 100 ways Jesus could have floored these guys in their argument. He could have said, well, okay, he was carrying a mat on the Sabbath, but unless your work 6 days a week is carrying mats on the Sabbath, and technically this wasn't work, okay? It was a hobby. Right. He could have said, I just healed him, could you chill out? There was dozens of ways he could have made them look stupid. He didn't need, but he pushes the nuclear button here. He says the same reasons that justify God's working on the Sabbath also justify mine. Now the reason this is controversial is because Jews believed and believe that God is unique. And in his uniqueness, no one has a special relationship with him. And so when they hear Jesus call God my Father, they would have heard Jesus say that he was God himself. And this is blasphemy in their ears. And so we read in the next sentence, for this reason they tried all the more to kill him, not only because he was breaking the Sabbath, but because he was calling God his Father, making himself equal with God. So, what do you think of Jesus in this story?
Brave.
Brave, yes. Also slightly annoying and contrarian. Like he's not even trying to fit in, is he? He's certainly not trying to be nice. And I mention that because it's very popular in our culture to think of Jesus as being those things. As being nice, as being kind. And the reason that's popular is because, of course, it's completely innocuous. Nice people who say nice things are unthreatening. They don't challenge us. They don't make us think. They don't make demands of us. Jesus was not at all like this. In the early church, people read this difficult sentence and they took from it that Jesus was God. Not partly God and partly human, but fully God and fully human. The God and man who likes hanging out in the dirty, seedy part of the city, and the God and man who can challenge the religious orthodoxy of his day. Which brings us, I suppose, to get to thinking about the Holy Trinity. As Christians, we believe that there's one God, not three. But we believe that that one God exists as three persons, Father, Son, and Spirit. And each person is fully God, and each person is fully active. So what Jesus is saying in this sentence, and what his hearers are hearing, is that he is God. And in those terms, we read the next sentence. Jesus says, very truly I tell you, the Son can do nothing by himself, but only what he sees his Father doing. Because whatever the Father does, the Son also does. For the Father loves the Son and shows him all he does. In other words, here's what Jesus is saying to his offended listeners. Here's what I do. I, as the second person of the Trinity, as the Son of God, I reveal what you cannot see. You believe that God is invisible. In your Old Testament it says that no one can see God. That God is mysterious, that he is hidden and inaccessible. That's what you believe, and you're right to believe that. But I pull back the curtain a little bit and show you something of what this God is like. And notice the context in which he says it. I was that cute once. That was one of those 5 minutes in church I could have read from the phone book. Can't compete. Yeah. I've still got most of the cuteness, I feel. Anyway. So here's, right, Jesus is saying, my job is to reveal the invisible nature of God. And notice the context where he says it. You want to know what the invisible God is like? I just checked out of a religious conference and got a taxi to the cesspool, to the dirty, seedy part of the city. Do you want to know what the invisible God is like? I just took time to find out information from a guy that you wouldn't look twice at, from a guy you judge and condemn. Do you want to know what the invisible God is like? I helped a man move on from his problems that you would do nothing but condemn. Do you want to know what the invisible God is like? I just rejected every line of your orthodoxy. I think nothing of it. I'm not into you, I'm into that. Not nice. What I reveal about the God you believe is unwelcome to you. Do you see, again, why they wanted to kill him? He didn't say nice things. He didn't do popular things. He challenged the very fabric of their deeply held religious beliefs. And they hated him for it. Now fast forward 2 millennia. How does this apply to us? I mean, what is our view of Jesus? What is our view of the Christian faith? What demands does it make of us? How threatening is it to us? Where do we find ourselves in this story? Deeply religious or deeply unorthodox? Which character are we most like? This is what the gospel invites us to do. It invites us to look at the people who are in it and ask the question, where am I in this story? What am I offended by in this story? What side would I be on in this story? And the answers are often uncomfortable to us. Any questions on any of that? Yes, Gina. I don't know what Jesus is thinking at this point because John doesn't tell us. Going from the context, I think, however, that I didn't get that far in the story, but going from the context, I think you could make a connection between what Jesus says there and what happens post-death. So Jesus talks often in the Gospels about the final judgment, about, the St. Peter at the pearly gates scenario, and he quite often invites people to see past this life to that moment 5 minutes after you're dead. And so it could be that that's what Jesus is thinking about here. He's saying, this is a great day in your life, maybe the best day you've ever had, but you've been healed today, but sooner or later you're going to get sick again and you're going to die. That is the lot of us all. Sooner or later we all fall down. And so giving thought to what happens at 5 minutes after we're dead is something I think Jesus wants people to do and wants them to adjust their choices accordingly. That, however, has to be held in tension in the Gospels with the whole idea of God's mercy. I mean, here Jesus goes to a place that was thought to be godless. God did not go there. And yet in this story it was the first place God went to. So these ideas are held in balance in Christianity. God is extraordinarily merciful and kind to sinful people, to people whose sin is not theoretical but actual. And yet, on the other side of the coin, there is this responsibility that we have to live right, make good choices. Yes, that's interesting and that's good. I don't think that's, however, the nuance of the question. Take, for example, I'll spin it another way if you like. Take, for example, a person who hates their job. Right? Is this relevant? No, good, okay. Right, so, okay, let's not talk about you, let's talk about your friends. Right? You've got this friend and they hate their job. And the reason you know they hate their job is because they never shut up about how much they hate their job. And all the time they're whinging and they don't pay enough and the boss is this and the boss is that and if only they could do this and they hate their job and they hate their job and they hate their job. And every now and again you come up with a totally radical suggestion that frankly deserves a Nobel Prize. Why don't you get another job? Why don't you, if you don't like your situation, change your situation? Oh, no. Couldn't do that. Then it's straight back to whinging about the situation. That's kind of, I think, where Jesus, he's not sure that this is where this guy's at, but he's seen enough of this situation to know that some people you can't help. Some people, it doesn't matter how much you tell them to get up and walk, they don't want to get up and walk. Because they're stuck. And they don't like being stuck, but they've kind of accepted it. So you can't tell them to shift because they ain't shifting. So Jesus is just saying, are you open to shifting? Are you open to changing? Now, pause on that and go into your situation. It sucks. Are you open to changing? Are you open to making a move? Stop pointing at your friends, right? Job, career, whatever, finances, whatever. Whinging about it isn't going to help you. Wishing it were different is just wishful thinking. Are you open to moving on, or are you not open to moving on? There's no right and wrong answer. But you need to know what the answer is. Good question. We're out of time. We've got to go. Thank you for coming. God bless you. See you next Sunday.
Bless you.